Welcome to Illuminating Hope, a podcast of Hope House. In this series, Advocating Justice, the Legal Battle, we dive into the legal battles that shape the fight for domestic violence survivors. In each episode, we bring you powerful conversations with the legal teams, court advocates, and change makers working tirelessly to bring justice, protection, and hope to survivors of domestic violence. From the courthouse to policy changes, from survivors' rights to legal strategies, we uncover the critical role the justice system plays in breaking cycles of abuse. Whether you are a survivor, advocate, or someone passionate about justice, this podcast series will empower and inform you. Justice isn't just about the law. It's about giving survivors a voice, protection, and a future. Tamara A. Veit received her DJ from the University of Missouri, Kansas City in 2004. It was in 2004 she began working as an associate attorney. She primarily practices in the area of family law. She is currently a member of a number of legal organizations, including the American Bar Association, the Missouri Bar Association, the Kansas City Metropolitan Bar Association, the Eastern Jackson County Bar Association, and the Association of Women's Lawyers. Tamara has served on numerous boards and committees for these organizations. She is currently on the board of directors as vice president for the Kansas City Metropolitan Bar Foundation and president of the Child Abuse Prevention Association. She is also a member of the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. She has planned several conferences, including the Kansas City Metropolitan Bar Foundation's Domestic Violence Alliance and the Missouri Bar Annual Family Law Conference. Throughout her career as an attorney, she has served as a guardian ad litem to the court, advocating children's rights. Tamara has served on the community board of her church and school committees. Tamara, welcome to the Illuminating Hope podcast. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
First, I want to ask you the question and ask you to explain what is a guardian ad litem and how do you advocate for children in legal cases?
A guardian ad litem is an attorney who represents the best interest of a minor child. In a domestic setting, the judge is required by statute to appoint a guardian ad litem for children if there has been any allegations of abuse or neglect. The court also has discretion in cases of high conflict or any other situation that they choose to have a guardian ad litem.
What factors do you consider when you're determining the best interest of a child you're representing?
In Missouri, we have 8 factors regarding custody, and those are the same ones that we look at when we're trying to make any kind of recommendations and creating a parenting plan that are for those kids. Our goal is best interest. So what we'll look at is, I generally talk to mom, dad, the children, possibly school, doctors, therapist, whoever has information. And then I weigh that information based on those 8 factors. And that could be anything from whether there was physical harm, there was emotional abuse. It could be just the dynamics between the parent and children. Sometimes the things you get by what you see and not what you hear are a big deal. It kind of give us more information.
Can you kind of talk about that process of how one would become a GAL?
So you have to be an attorney to be guardian ad litem. And Missouri has standards that are required to be followed, and you're required your first year to take an 8-hour course, including all of the factors that the courts look for in there, but you also have to have one on permanency that will give you kind of an entrance to being a guardian ad litem. But every year after that, you are required to do 3 hours of a guardian ad litem training and submit that to the county with affidavits showing that you have taken it and fulfilled it. And those guardian ad litem classes can really run their gamut to things that go with about children in domestic violence situations. It could be children where there's cases and there's mental health issues at home. It doesn't require just necessarily physical abuse, because we see the effects of drugs and alcohol, the effects of high conflict, All of those things play a role in it.
What steps do you take to ensure the child's safety in cases, especially cases involving domestic violence?
Sometimes that's harder than you would think, and it mainly because we're not a judge and we are still bound by what the laws are, what the statute is, and then ultimately by what the judge said. So there have been times where I would have put more restrictive contact based on things that I've seen and heard, and the judge decided that wasn't going to be the case. The factors that we look at with domestic violence, that's some of where we look at how do the kids physically react. So I always have mom bring them in one time, dad bring them in one time, or whoever the significant other is, and I have them wait out in my lobby for a little bit, and I watch them. I see, are the kids hanging on that person? Are they sitting as far away as possible with no eye contact? Because some of those are a lot of the clues that you can kind of see of the dynamics in the household. And sometimes if they are still right there with them, you can kind of tell it's a forced situation just by the way the children are looking, the way, they're kind of tugging away from the parent, just certain things like that you can kind of see the dynamic.
So reading body language, it sounds like it's really a big thing.
Yes.
When it comes to determining if a child has suffered from domestic violence in the home.
I think, too, you would have to determine, because you don't know this child before they become your case. Not all children are verbal. They don't express themselves. So I would think you would have to employ quite a variety of different things in order to try to really get to know that child and understand what they are going through.
So part of that is I'll get police records if they have them and review police reports. I'll get doctor reports, whether it's for the potential victim, if there is some, and or for the children. Therapy records are also big on what's there. We also talk to third parties, but the problem with third parties is they only see that public view of the couple and that play act that they put on. They don't see what goes behind bars. And that's third parties even for their family and such. They miss those things. They don't show it. It can be difficult to get that information, but you rely on as much information through whatever sources you can get, whether it's from the school and the teacher. Sometimes the kids really reveal more than they think that they are when they're trying to maybe make a parent sound better just because they've been told, if you tell anyone about this, mom's going to get hurt, or you'll never see this person again, or daddy's going to go to jail, or mommy's going to go to jail. They slip up and they make comments and they may say things that kind of give you clues too.
I know there's probably so many factors, but how do you assess who the child would be better off with, which custodial parent the child would be better off?
So it can be difficult, especially because sometimes when you're looking at, especially in a domestic violence situation, I'm just using dad and mom just because it's pretty common, where mom is generally the victim, but mom looks downright crazy. And it can be hard to realize that, yes, mom is not the one that's coming off as being the one who has it all together and is being protective. She sounds like a loony bin, and you have to be able to figure things out and see past it to realize that this is a situation that she's in. It's not a permanent one. It is how things have gotten to this point right now. The fear of whatever may or may not have come and is coming changes how we act on it.
We were talking in another podcast about how an abuser does like to use the courtroom as a stage. They're calm, they're cool, they're collected. That can be so deceiving if you do not understand the dynamics of domestic violence, if you're not trauma informed to really understand that survivor and what they're dealing with.
A lot of abusers are very manipulative. I had somebody sitting in my office. I was the Guardian Ad Litem, and he kept fiddling with his wrist. There was a bracelet on it, and I sat there and talked to him for an hour, and he just couldn't take it anymore because he kept wanting me to ask about this bracelet but didn't want to be the one to initiate it. I knew what he wanted, and so I absolutely refused to address it. And finally he broke down and was like, I love my daughter so much. I have her name on my bracelet and I wear it everywhere with me. And that's how you know how much that she means to me, that I won't ever take this off. I saw him 2 days before that in court, no bracelet on.
How hard is it for you to remain neutral when you know it is evident what's going on?
A lot of people view guardian items as being neutral. They're not neutral. Like, you can't make a recommendation or a decision without taking some kind of position. So you can't be neutral. I mean, that means you have no feelings one way or the other. When I look at it and I explain to it is Guardian Ad Litems are an independent party. They do ultimately make a recommendation. They do support one side or the other. A lot of times we kind of go down in a different path, so both parties aren't so happy with us. But it's not neutral in the fact that you're going to have to make a decision. And part of what that means is people aren't going to be happy with what you want. And it could be one party, it could be the other. What you have to do throughout, though, is be open. That things you hear and see could change your mind. So while you're independent, you can't be closed-minded. You have to look at all of the evidence, all of the information provided to you so that you can make some kind of recommendation as to what is in the child's best interest.
We talk a lot about curiosity on this podcast, too. And I love that you were curious enough to check out that dad's wrist to see if that bracelet was on there or not, to see if he was telling you the truth or not.
Yeah.
Interesting little point. A simple bracelet can be so telling.
In another podcast, we were talking about the child protective system and then the adult protective system. So when I hear you kind of explaining this process, you're kind of that child protective system in this adult assistive world.
Yeah.
Then you're looking at, in lots of different cases, like so ex partes.
Yeah.
What other cases are you Guardian Ad Litem on?
Divorce cases, modification of custody, paternity action where the parents have never been married. I will do some step-parent adoptions, but I mainly focus on the domestic side where we're doing divorce, custody kind of situations, paternity actions.
And is there anything specific about the child protective world, training wise, or anything that you have to make sure that you kind of have as well to work in this adult protective system?
So they have certain requirements that you have to meet. Their main one is you have to have one that is based on permanency, which is really affects more the juvenile court than it does the domestic court.
And what is permanency?
So permanent means, especially is in the juvenile court, they want to have a finite solution. And usually the goal is reunification with a parent, one or both parents. That would be the goal that they would aim for. CLEs talk about ways and things like that to get you to that point. That training is on how to determine what can we do to get to that permanency position.
And that system is separate from what you specifically are working in.
Correct, yeah. There's two systems really when you look at Guardian Ad Litems. However, all the training is the same. All of the statutory requirements and things like that, the guidelines as a Guardian Ad Litem are all the same. And there are Guardian Ad Litems that do both. The process and the system for both is so different. They really need to be divided out because they each have things that don't really apply to the other one. A domestic case, a Guardian Ad Litem, is much more restricted, is bound by a lot more rules. Whereas in a juvenile court case, those rules of evidence aren't quite the same. And they have more of a voice and more of discretions. Whenever you are in the domestic side, if the parties can't reach a decision, the judge is going to hear mom's side, dad's side, and then the Guardian Ad Litem side. Our job to submit the evidence to the court for them to make a decision. In a juvenile court situation, you hear recommendations from the AJO, which is the attorney for the juvenile office. You hear the Guardian Ad Litem. There is also a caseworker, and then attorneys for each of the parents. Those Guardian Ad Litem recommendations weigh in very heavily with the court. In domestic, they do as well, those Guardian Ad Litem, but we, as a Guardian Ad Litem on domestic sides, our recommendation is in the form of just of a parenting plan. We don't get to take the stand and testify and say, this is what I found. I have to present that through evidence, through records or witnesses, whereas in the end of a juvenile case, in those review hearings and such, they get to stand up and say, well, this is what I think needs to happen, which we don't get to do in domestic. Now, there are some counties outside of this area that do take more of that information in from Guardian Ad Litems, but not around here.
I was going to ask, how often do the judges take your recommendations? But you're saying that your recommendation is through a plan. In the plan that would say, Dad shouldn't have visitation, or it should be 100% mom, whatever. That's where your information
Yes.
is
So
going to be presented.
A parenting plan sets forth what type of custody. Is it going to be joint or is it going to be sole? It sets forth all the time and contact with each parent. It sets forth all of the rules and just general guidelines that need to be followed. And then there's also the decision making, how things are going to be decided. In a domestic case, we present our evidence, and at the end, just like each parent does, we submit to the court our parenting plan that has all that information set forth in there. And then the judge will then take all of it back and weigh in and make that decision. I think our judges respect our guardian ad litems on the domestic side and do consider that. I think the parents should feel like this is their case, right or wrong. And so their voice is going to be heard by the judge if we're going to court. And there have been times that I've made a recommendation and the judge hasn't gone with it. It's not unheard of, because there's things that I see or I learn that don't make it into evidence. And there's factors and information that don't get relayed. And so that will restrict what the judge can do.
What laws are out there not only to protect the children, but so that their voices can be heard when it comes to being represented by a GAL?
One of the 8 factors when determining custody in Missouri is the child's unrestricted opinion. It used to be what the child wanted. Changed a little bit, but it's still essentially the same thing. In a guardian ad litem case, what I do is I meet with the child, I explain my role, I explain to a certain extent the court process. One of the things that I explain to them is confidentiality. I explain to them that before I do make an ultimate recommendation to the court, I will talk with you about it. And if you disagree with it, you can let me know. So if I have a parenting plan that I'm going to represent in court, but I know the child does not want that, I will offer it to the court, and then I will let the court know that the child is not in agreement with this plan. I don't necessarily go into details because some of that is confidential with the client, and a lot of times kids don't want the parents to know.
Right.
They don't want to feel like they're choosing. And so sometimes, like when we force them to say this is what we want, we're asking them to choose. And even if they know something they want, they don't want to make that.
That's a lot of responsibility.
It is.
And then what are the ramifications to that child? I chose this parent, not this one.
So, and I think it's part of my role as a guardian ad litem to really emphasize to the child, I understand what you're saying and I hear you, but ultimately this is a decision that falls on me, on your mom, on your dad, and on the judge. So whatever happens, whatever you want or don't want, the outcome, it doesn't fall out on you for something you did or didn't do. It belongs on the adults, because I really want them not to feel
responsible. In any way. What common mistakes do parents make during custody disputes that can negatively impact the outcome for the child?
One of the big things is probably talking to the kid too much about the case and about the other parent and just the negativity. They forget that little feet and little ears can hear a lot more, because they'll say, oh no, we never talk about this, and where they can hear. I'm like, are they in the house? Well, yeah, then they can hear. They've heard you say it. That is one of those things where the biggest thing I think that hurts a lot of people is they start telling the kids too much about what's going on. Or telling the kids, don't forget to tell the guardian ad litem this, don't forget to tell them this is important. I think the things that they do, whether it's intentional or unintentionally, trying to get the kids to disclose certain things.
You'd already explained one misconception, which is remaining neutral. What are other misconceptions that maybe society would have about guardian ad litems?
One of the big things is that I'm a judge. I am not a judge. I do not wear that black robe, and my recommendation is as valid as mom or dad's. The court does not have to go with what I say. Now, does that mean that the court may weigh mine still a little bit heavier depending upon what that judge knows in the recommendation and based on the evidence? Yeah. Ultimately, the judge can do whatever the judge wants. Let's say that if mom or dad refuse to follow a recommendation along the way by the guardian ad litem, there's nothing that I can do. Now, the court may ultimately think that my recommendation might have been a valid situation and the party should have done it, but I'm not a judge. I don't make a decision. I can't force them to do something. I'm not a superhero. Like, there are things that I can't fix. I can't change. There's no solutions to. Right now, I've got a case where the kids are flunking out of school and everyone wants to know how to fix it. There's nothing I can do. I've done everything I can possibly think of and then some, but ultimately it's going to come down to that child and what the school is going to accept.
So that makes me kind of think of the importance of other community partners being a part of this legal process. Like these children, this is something that these children are experiencing. Are the children getting therapy? Are the parents getting therapy? What does that look like? What kind of, has there been conversations with the school? Who else could be at the table to help this move to a better light?
With this in particular instance with the child, some of this goes beyond what my role is as a guardian ad litem. Every guardian ad litem is going to pick and choose what they do and don't do. In this case, mom and dad are such high conflict that they can't be in a room by themselves. But we needed to figure out what was going on, so I communicated with the school, the principal, the vice principal, the kids' teachers, and the social work. We sat down and had a meeting to figure out what was going on and things that we can do to change things or to help out. Was that something I had to do? No. Is it something that worked for a little while? Not every guardian ad litem will do that, and it doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It's just that's how this situation for me worked out. Now, I do work very closely with therapists for both the parents, for the children. If they do co-parent counseling or family therapy, we rely heavily on our therapists for guidance and what is said or things that they see and observe that we may miss and we may not know about to even ask.
Right, because the trauma that could be experienced by these children comes out in a lot of different ways. So whether they're flunking out of school or self-harm or into substances themselves, kind of that all is trauma.
Yes, I had same family. The boy was not sleeping at home because he was scared. And so he would go to school and crawl under his desk and sleep every day. So those are some of the things that talking to the teachers, talking to the therapist, talking to the school, all of those things, it took everyone involved to kind of figure out what was going on and things that could happen to fix the situation and protect the child as well as give him a chance to start healing.
How often have you used the Guardian program? I'm going to say supervised visitation program because everyone might not know what Guardian program is.
I use the Guardian program a lot. I'm not even sure I could give you a number of times over the last 20 years that I've used the Guardian program. The one thing about the Guardian program that I really like is that they are there, they're supervising, they will intervene if necessary. There's off-duty officers there that can protect everyone and make sure there's as low conflict as possible. They do work with the kids, so there's signals if they feel like they need to leave early but don't want to stay, so that's helpful. And they also do reports so we can see as a guardian ad litem how things went. Are there issues that have come up? Because usually sometimes after a supervised visit, I'll have one party call me and give me this whole scenario, the other party call me, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to call the therapist to see what happened. Mom wasn't in the room and dad's saying this happened, so what happened? What really happened? Having the supervisor there is very helpful. I've also seen some of the supervisors maybe give some tips or things when the parent maybe didn't know how to interact or didn't know the best way to do it. So they've kind of like given them a little bit of guidance of, hey, why don't you try this?
I've sat in and shadowed at the Hope House Guardian program and the supervised visitation session, and they log everything, those supervisors. It is amazing. I'm so thankful that Hope House has that Guardian program.
Well, I was just going to say that program is meant for the children, and it's about the relationship with that non-custodial parent and hopefully making the best of that situation, whatever that looks like for that family, which is just goes along with what you're doing as well. It's about the child and really what the child needs.
Well, in the Guardian program with the supervisor gives us an eye into the relationship that we're not going to have as a guardian, because we're not going to get the chance to sit down and see mom and dad with that child for X amount of time. Now, as a guardian, I have sat through a supervised visit. I also had a situation where I was able to watch the visit without them knowing, so I could see what they were doing with me not in the room and trying to play up to me as the guardian that they were the better parent and that they had a better relationship than what they did. And I think those are helpful ways as well.
We talked a little bit about trauma-informed care and trauma-informed service. Hope House has a partnership with the Kansas City, Missouri Bar Foundation. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that because we do get a lot of people together in the room at one time. Can you you speak to what is the KC Bar Foundation and what's your current role at the foundation?
Kansas City Bar Association is an association where all of local attorneys within the Metropolitan area have the option to join. The foundation part of that is the community part, the part that we're giving back and interacting and our charitable arm. This year I am the vice president of the foundation. The foundation has 3 major programs. One is Military Matters, where we help veterans with some legal problems or veterans, current active people. And then we have a student law academy where we work with students from underprivileged schools to educate them about the law. And so they can see different aspects of it and learn about that. And then they get to do a job shadowing. And so we also have extended that. So if they want to take the LSAT once they get through, then we help pay that fee so they can take the class and then the registration fee. And then once they get to the point where they're applying for law schools, we'll help pay some of those chair fees and application fees. The other part is our Domestic Violence Alliance. It used to be Children's Interdisciplinary Conference. And I was looking back, and I think I've been part of that for since 2010. So, and I've been on that committee for years. I actually chaired it for 4 years. The great thing about this program is we've had it going for over 25 years. And it is an all-day conference with people from all sorts of backgrounds. So we have lawyers and judges, we have cops, therapists, psychologists, school teachers, everyone across the gamut. And it is a day to kind of come in and we learn about different aspects of domestic violence and how it affects children, how it affects the victims. We've also kind of learned about the batterers as well and how that reacts. We've also touched on things like human trafficking, because when you look at it, domestic violence is more extensive than what people realize. It's not just mom and dad at home, someone hurting the other one. It expands out and it tumbles out and it affects all aspects of that child in their life and a child at every age. But it's a great program and it's free. So, and you can go as an attorney, you get CLE hours. As a therapist, you can get CUE hours, and we don't charge for that. We have lunch and snacks, and we have a lot of great speakers. Sometimes they're national, sometimes they're local, but they come from all different fields.
What's the importance of bringing not just lawyers to this conference?
Because domestic violence isn't just a lawyer problem. And if we want to work on, I don't know that we can fix it, but if we want to work on helping and we want to make sure we're covering our bases to help all aspects of the person's life, we need people to come in and need people to understand about domestic violence. When the cops that are going to the house are having to witness it or testify, the kids, those teachers need it when they're going to school and they're acting out and there's things that they disclose. Teachers need to know how to handle that situation. Psychologists, not only can they learn about domestic violence, but they can also help all of the rest of us. What are some solutions? What are things that we can do? How can we work and create safety plans that are better, that are there? And sometimes it's, how do we ask questions and get information without asking, do you get hit at home? Because most of the time you're not going to get a direct answer. And so you've got to be able to learn and pick up cues to figure out the best way to get those answers. I've had a woman more than once sit across from me, and the entire conversation, she's like, oh no, I don't get abused. I don't get abused. They have a bunch of different, depending upon what you're looking at. They have the SAVE program and a few other legality things. And you can questions that they kind of trained in to ask. And at the end of it, I'm like, you may not think that that's what happened, but this is exactly what the issue is. This is exactly what it is. And they're like, well, I didn't say no. You don't have to say no with words.
Bringing all those people together in the room is also giving a face to unknown systems, and it opens doors for collaboration. Can you speak to any of that?
Yes, it's been really good because I've met a lot of officers that I would not have otherwise and that have helped, especially whenever they've been called in to deal with a family. I will call them and say, hey, what did you see? What did you observe? Can you give me any insight as to what really happened? I've also met therapists there that I'm like, I'm writing down this person's name because I think they would be a good fit for this client. Whether it's the mom, the dad, the child, those are chances to meet and make connections that I wouldn't otherwise have. There have been times where I've had to go do a home visit and I know that it's not safe to go without somebody with me. And And so through this, I've met that option. It also gives a chance for everyone to say and talk about the part of the domestic violence that they see that the other ones don't. And whenever we're creating things like safety plans, having that input from the police and teachers and therapists is really good because it gives us an idea of things I wouldn't think about from a safety picture. They're outside my wheelhouse. I can tell you what you need to do legally, and I can guess on some of the other things after 20 years, you build up some base knowledge, but having somebody say, look, hey, you're not thinking about this, that's always helpful.
I think that's what's so important is that, we've talked about this many times, is that domestic violence doesn't just happen in a vacuum, and that families don't just have one issue that they have to address. And by bringing everyone to the table, you're really addressing all of the needs that those families are experiencing. Everywhere that they're touching is going to be impacted. So I think it's really important. And making those connections that you can help each other with the particular cases that you're working on, that's so important.
Well, and the victims show different people, different parts.
Right.
And so if you don't reach out and you don't talk with them, you're missing part of the information, things that may be very pertinent for you to know. As a guardian ad litem, you can't work in a bubble. Like, you can't say, oh, this is the only thing I'm going to do or the only thing I'm going to ask about. It doesn't work that way.
If somebody from the community or another organization or profession would want to get involved in the Kansas City, Missouri Bar Foundation conferences, how would they get involved?
We have a website at www.kcmbf.org. On there, it shows that there are 3 legal programs. It has each of the military matters, the student law academy, and it has a domestic violence. You can put your email in there to request information. You can also call up there. The program is usually always held in October every year during Domestic Violence Month. More information goes out then. I will say that it sells out every year. So there are limited seats just because there's only a limited space. Depending upon what's going on, sometimes we're able to do some of it by Zoom so that we can do virtual as well. I will say it's not as impactful. Right. Doing it online. Being there and being a part of it, you get the chance to block everything else out and focus on it so you're actually getting the training. Whereas I found if I'm on Zoom, I'm like checking my email, people are calling, and so it's more difficult to get all the information.
And you don't have the opportunity to connect with those people either. You don't have those conversations that just happen when you're together.
Do you know the reasoning behind why domestic violence is one of the 3 that is focused on?
Domestic violence has been in children has been the longest standing program. It was started almost 30 years, I think. And for a longer time, that was the only function that we had this conference, and that was it. Military Matters and Student Law Academy hadn't come in except for the last 10 to 15 years. Student Law Academy, we're going into, I think, our 6th year. I don't know exactly what triggered it, that it was like the first one, but it's always been a standing piece of part of it that we've done.
Do you change locations for the conference?
No, we hold it at the Kansas City Bar Association offices. We have a big conference room area with enough equipment that we can do Zoom. You can be there in person, and it holds probably like 125 people.
And is it mainly people from the Jackson County area or just all surrounding areas?
All surrounding areas. All the information is shared between the whole KC Metro on both sides of the state line. If you're an attorney or a therapist, they try to get CEUs and CLEs on both sides as well.
Is there anything that you would like to share that we haven't covered today?
I've been doing Guardian Ad Litem work for 20 years. I'm not even sure that seems possible, but it's hard. It is so hard because there's usually not a clear answer and a clear solution. And at the same time, it's a labor of love. Couldn't imagine not doing it. There is a misconception that guardian ad litems get a lot of money for this. We don't. It's completely a labor of love and the desire to help kids and families. It's a great way to give back to the community and a great way to give back to family and serve the court, to serve our families, the community, all of it. Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.